You ever order a piece of equipment that looks sleek on the photo, only to find out it's a brick you can't move or a tool that just doesn't fit the job you had in mind? I've been there more than once, especially with niche machines like line boring rigs that promise portable but end up taking half a day to unload, hook up, and still leave you wondering if you bought the right thing. That hesitation is real, and the stakes are high. You're spending a good chunk of cash, you might need to rewire your shop, and if the machine can't actually bore the rods you work on, you've wasted both money and time. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The TECHTONGDA portable line boring and welding machine tries to solve that exact problem by combining a line boring unit and an overlay welding head into one 2-in-1 package. The idea is simple: you set up the machine, run the servo-driven boring bar to size a connecting rod or similar component, then flip a switch and fire up the welding overlay without swapping tools. For a small shop or a serious hobbyist, that sounds like a huge time saver, but does it actually deliver in everyday use? First off, let's talk about the setup. The unit comes with an electric control box that houses the main drive electronics, a servo motor for the boring bar, and a set of interchangeable boring tools. Because it's designed for 110-volt European connectors, you can plug it straight into a standard workshop outlet without needing a dedicated 3-phase supply. That's a big plus if you're operating out of a garage or a rented space where you can't bring in heavy power. The whole frame fits on a small rolling cart, so you can roll it to a workbench, lock the wheels, and you're ready to go. In my tests, the cart's wheels locked firmly enough that the machine didn't drift when the servo motor kicked in, which is something you don't want when you're trying to keep a hole centered on a thin rod. Now, practicality. The boring bar itself is the heart of the machine. It's driven by a servo motor, which means you get smooth, controllable feed rates instead of the jerky motion you sometimes see on cheaper, purely electric models. That smoothness translates to cleaner holes, especially when you're boring a 10 mm to 30 mm diameter connecting rod for a motorcycle engine rebuild. I ran a couple of test pieces, and the bore stayed within a ½ millimeter of the target size without having to do a secondary re-ream. For most small-scale fabricators, that level of accuracy is more than enough. You don't need CN grade tolerances for a one-off project, but you do need consistency. The overlay welding function is where the 2-in-1 claim really shines. After boring, you can attach the welding head, which aligns automatically with the bore's axis. The electric control box lets you adjust the welding current on the fly, so you can switch between a light overlay for thin-walled parts and a heavier bead for a structural repair. In a real-world scenario, imagine you're fixing a cracked crankshaft rod on a vintage tractor. You bore out the damaged section, then immediately weld a reinforcing sleeve without having to move the part to a separate welding table. That saves not just time, but also preserves alignment, a common source of error when you have to reposition a part multiple times. But there are trade-offs. The machine is limited to 110-volt input, which caps the overall power it can deliver. While it handled mild steel rods up to about 35 mm in diameter without stalling, I noticed the motor began to hum loudly and the feed rate slowed when I pushed beyond that. If you're regularly working on larger automotive components or need to bore heavy-duty shafts, you'll likely find the torque insufficient. The servo motor, while smooth, doesn't have the same burst power as a full-size industrial line boring machine that runs on 3-phase power. So the sweet spot for this device is small to medium parts where precision and portability outweigh raw cutting force. Another practical consideration is the duty cycle. The control box does a decent job of monitoring temperature, but after about 1,520 minutes of continuous boring, the motor's temperature indicator flickered, and the unit automatically reduced speed to prevent overheating. In a production environment where you might need to run 10 or 20 parts back-to-back, you'd have to factor in cool-down periods. For a home shop or occasional repair job, that pause isn't a deal-breaker, but it's something to be aware of before you commit. Who should buy this? If you're a small shop owner who occasionally needs to resize connecting rods, pistons, or lightweight shafts, and you value the ability to move the machine between workstations, this is a solid candidate. It's also a good fit for hobbyist builders. Think custom motorcycle projects, small engine restorations, or even a makerspace that wants to add a line boring capability without draining the budget. The fact that you get welding overlay in the same package means you can finish a repair.